Well, hello everyone and welcome to this very special webinar hosted by PM Today in partnership with Tempus Resource by Prosymmetry. I'm Amy Hatton. I am, as some of you will know, the Associate Editor of PM Today, and I'm joined today by the very lovely Lloyd Norman, who is the Vice President of Strategic Solutions for Prosymmetry. Lloyd's here today to talk about the very thorny issue of driving portfolio value flow with adaptive resource planning. Resource planning, something that I think we can all agree is a really difficult topic for anyone in the PMO, project practitioner, portfolio management space. It's one that I have seen Prosymmetry carry customers on a fantastic journey with, using their tools and their expertise. And Lloyd, of course, is handling strategic solutions for global customers for Prosymmetry to help them to solve their resource management woes, I think it's fair to say. Lloyd brings with him more than 25 years experience as a resource management expert and also a portfolio management expert. And he has worked, amongst other things, at a top 50 financial institution. He's been a consultant for IBM. He brings a wealth of experience to Prosymmetry, but actually joined Prosymmetry just in March 22 of this year. So welcome, Lloyd. How are you doing?
Amy, it's so good to be here. Thank you for such a kind introduction. And it is fabulous, actually, to be working with Prosymmetry. I've been a user of their product for years, and they're very customer driven. And I'm happy to say that some of the features that we'll be demonstrating today were actually pulled into that project, and in part because of the consulting I provided them as a customer. But now being more integrated in with Prosymmetry, happy to be actively involved in a product management and leadership role there. What a fun organization, and how capable the people and the product is. So thank you.
They're fantastic. We've been following Prosymmetry's journey since around about 2007, I think, and I agree with you, it's a great organization to be connected with. So without further ado, let's get into this topic of adaptive resource planning. Now, it's worth saying that you are going to be speaking, headlining two of the major UK shows happening in 2022. One of them is the PMO conference, which is taking place in London and Edinburgh in June, and the other is Project Challenge in September. Very excited to hear your presentations there, but being the sticky beak journalist I am, I've got ahead of the game. We've actually just recorded a podcast where we talked through some of perhaps the higher level strategic thought leadership issues around resource management, adaptive resource planning, lean portfolio management, that kind of thing. Today, we're going to delve into that in a bit more detail, and you're going to, I'm hoping you're going to be able to share some snapshots of the tools and techniques involved. So let's start perhaps with lean portfolio management. This is a really interesting one that we picked up on the podcast. To me, it comes across as possibly maybe a slightly more pragmatic interpretation of Agile. Have I understood that correctly? Can you just give us a view of what it's all about? And feel free to share some visuals if you'd like to.
You bet. Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen here. I think there'll be some things that are hopefully very much of interest.
Fantastic.
All right.
And I should say for our viewers, even though this is an on-demand webinar, we are recording it live because we like to keep things interesting. So if we do get any little glitches, just bear with us.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
We can. Wonderful.
So I'm going to give credit where credit's due. This is actually right off the scaledagileparametric.com website. You know, this concept of Agile at scale is really where the LPM terminology comes into play. I think everyone on the call here is aware of the fact that, look, on top of all the execution methodologies that we may be pursuing, whether it's waterfall, agile release trains, if you're a little more mature, or sort of classic operational delivery work, there has to be a management level where you are, in fact, taking the vision and strategic themes that are being presented ostensibly by the C-suite and saying, how are we going to execute those? And as you and I have discussed before, I'm a great proponent of this notion that plans do not become strategy until you assign resources. And if you think about that in almost any aspect of your life, that is in fact true. Your plans to go to America and see the great state of Utah do not become a strategy until you book your reservation. That's right.
Absolutely
Same
true.
thing with portfolio management. And the concept of lean portfolio management is really consistent with this notion of agile, right? We want to make sure that we are providing value incrementally as frequently as possible, and that value is being tracked by someone representing the customer experience, the individual that or group of individuals or organization that's funding whatever work that we are doing. They need to be intimately involved with the delivery process. It's why there's feedback loops that are so effective at a team level and at a release train level if you're talking agile, but the same should be true of waterfall projects. Waterfall projects should be delivered in phases. And if it turns out that you have a project that looks like after you've done your initial design work, that it's not going to be feasible, there should be some very candid discussion about giving that thing a good burial, right, before it goes any further. And, we used to have a motto, and I guess I still do. Look, it's not wrong to take projects, kill them early and kill them often, when it makes sense to do so. So, there's this level of portfolio management that's required to make sure that holistically you are pushing value through all of your resources in a way that they are synced with each other and that everybody is rowing in the same direction. And so that's sort of captured up here. There's tools and techniques, and I would commend you to, if you click on any one of these things, you can go in here to Scaled Agile and get further information on that, everything from funding. They're big fans of participatory budgeting, those sorts of things. I'm a big fan of, look, you should incorporate best practices wherever you can, regardless of your methodologies, and especially across methodologies. And there needs to be a level above those that are executing, and that includes the project management realm, right? Above that level, program and portfolio management that are really helping the enterprise to drive towards those goals.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the enterprise there, actually, Lloyd, because that's the next thing I was going to ask you about. I don't know if you're aware of this, but PM Today was actually the first project management publication started in the UK, and we're heading for our 40th birthday now, which means that well, thank you very much. We're very proud of the coverage we've given, and we're uniquely positioned because we've seen this journey from the beginning. The point of that being, when we started covering project management, it was very much, of course, the discrete role of the IT. There was this cliche around sort of IT sitting in the back room trying to work out ways for people not to be able to do stuff, and that was sort of how project management was seen. Now, of course, it's had an absolute explosion. I'm always banging on about this. Everyone who knows me as an editor knows this. It's exploded across the enterprise, and I think that's one of the biggest changes that I've seen, is this emergence of project management right across the enterprise, often held together, of course, by the PMO. That, of course, brings new complexities to the challenge of managing resources. You've got all of those interdependencies, but not only are they interdependencies, they're happening across multiple, possibly disparate departments. Then you've got external bodies, supply chains, all of that kind of thing. So I just wondered if we could take a look in a little bit more detail at some of those complexities and how you would start to get to grips with them. And again, do feel free to share or not share, depending on what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think it's important for businesses, and certainly at the executive level, they understand this conceptually. They want to be agile. And for your audience, I would submit to you a wonderful question to ask is, do you want to do agile or do you want to be agile? And in fact, you should be agile, right? And that means I run into some people that are so determined that we're going to adopt this new methodology, de jure, whatever it may be, Scrum of Scrum, Scaled Agile framework, right? That perhaps they get a little wrapped around the axle, so to speak. If you have an upgrade and it's got a known requirement and it's going to take certain skill sets to do that, and there's no ambiguity about this, I would submit to you that perhaps a reasonable approach would be to take a waterfall approach to that. Because one of the advantages of Agile, right, is to iterate to make sure that, if there's, new capabilities you're delivering, that they are in fact aligned with the customer requirements, whatever they may be. Again, not that you shouldn't be mapping out requirements for something as rigid as a system upgrade. But, if you're telling everybody they have to go execute Agile when it actually might be introducing more overhead than is necessary to execute that capability, aren't you in fact being less agile, right? I mean, if you look at that holistically, you're putting a round peg in a square hole, perhaps. And so that would be the first thought I have relative to holistic overall enterprise delivery. Just think about what you're doing. And please, don't let the tail wag the dog. You should, in fact, choose whatever methodology that you want to use that would be most effective. Now, let me share a screen, if I may, because this topic comes up quite often. And I'll make this full screen as well.
Fantastic.
You bet. All right, can you see that?
We can.
Perfect. All right, so the concept here, and let me lower this. The concept here is, it doesn't matter what your methodology is, right? You need to be planning. There needs to be some upstream intervention to make sure that you can get everybody working on the same page. All of these methodologies, they all recommend as a best practice that you do some upstream planning. Now that's anathema to some of the people that do pure Agile that perhaps have only done this at a team level. But again, if you go out to scaledagileprimeric.com, I would encourage you to actually look up the concept of planning horizons, and they'll show you that right up here, you should be planning not only 1 to 3 PIs out, but you should have roadmaps that are going 1 to 3 years out, with the understanding that nothing gets committed until the PI boundary. And the same is true really of waterfall projects. It's why we have program and portfolio roadmaps, right? We set the groundwork. We've got the high beams on instead of, our eyes just looking, if you will, at the tachometer all the time and saying, what's coming over the hill? And let's make sure that we're not going to overdrive our headlights, especially from a resource commitment. Because if you think about what gates portfolio delivery, it's virtually always resources.
Mm.
I cannot tell you how many times, as I have consulted with various people across a broad array of industries, that it's abundantly clear that they've run out of people long before they've run out of money.
Yeah.
And so, our position is, look, you need to consolidate your roadmap planning. Let your individual execution occur in whatever tool you may. We're not about ripping and replacing your tools. Most people use Jira, Agile, delivery, the Microsoft project, Azure DevOps, if you will. Waterfall projects, heaven only knows how many PPM tools there are out there, right? We have people doing this in Tempus, but many use whatever. Microsoft project, yada, yada, yada. Ops work, look, I don't care if it's ServiceNow or if you're doing things in Excel, you need to be following best practices, which means you've got a 12-month staffing plan. And you can reach out and with reasonable confidence say, look, based on all the other work that I do, because these chaps down here, they're the guys that are not only doing ops work, but they're the ones that are typically getting pulled into either Epic or project delivery. And if you consolidate your roadmap planning, really, and focus upstream here a little bit. There's a wonderful article, in fact, that I'm going to be talking about more in detail, Beyond Burnout, from the Harvard Business Review. And they talk about the desperate need for upstream intervention, not downstream tactics. And I thought, that's so true. My life experience, look, when you get to the PI boundary, or if you're talking a project, you get to the point where you are planning your next task and you're out of resources, you're way too late. You are far too late in the process, especially in today's marketplace, where so many people have willingly opted to out of the workplace, so to speak. There's a great demand for people, especially white-collar people with high specialized skills. And it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we don't just focus on the now. You can't, of course, lose track of that, but you better be, spending time on what's next in the pipeline and then what's near in the pipeline. And your forecasts need to be flexible and fluid accordingly, but you can't not forecast that. You need to have architecture in the room. You need to have the subject matter experts that are cross-functionally providing skills for your project or your epic delivery and saying, look, my team's going to be over-allocated here, here, and here based on our priorities. The challenge is, how do you do that easily, right? And that's where Tempus comes in. And we're going to be talking about that and showing some of those capabilities. In fact, happy to get into a little bit of that.
I think that'd be great because, I mean, all of this makes perfect sense, and it kind of ties in with that, for me anyway, with that message around taking perhaps a slightly more pragmatic approach, a slightly leaner approach to how you tackle each project or each program or each release, rather than, as you say, just kind of doing Agile for the sake of it or doing waterfall because that's how it's always been done. It strikes me that for a lot of the people watching this webinar, of course they can't comment because it's on demand, but I'll speak for them, that if you are of the Agile camp and you do value Agile, some of what you're saying might at first feel counterintuitive, because I think sometimes we forget that Agile is not the same as doing it at the last minute. They are in fact completely different things, and sometimes people think that something can only be Agile if it is incredibly iterative. So the point you're making here about taking things 9-12 months even further out is one that I think our viewers would benefit from a little bit of kind of live demonstration. If you could jump into Tempus and maybe show us some of the capabilities in action. Let's take an example. I'm an IT PMO. I've got 3 major transformation programs on the go, then a new regulation comes along or something like that. Have to deal with it. And I think this is a scenario that you deal with often. You have to deal with it. You can't not deal with it, but you hadn't planned on needing to release those resources for those things. That's one example that we might keep in mind as you show us around the capabilities.
You bet. I'm smiling as you mention that because I think of an issue where in the not too distant past, we had a very large piece of unplanned work enter our portfolio. No one could have seen this regulatory challenge coming our way, and it was clear that we weren't going to make this deadline unless we repositioned resources. And in this particular case, we were short on QA people. And so a very well-intentioned QA manager of her own volition, again, well-intentioned, but did not coordinate with portfolio management, went in and spontaneously stopped 5 projects that were in flight, 3 of which were going to deliver within 45 days. And they met that requirement. All was well and good, but my heavens, the downstream implications from that, we weren't even able to spin those projects up again for 9 months.
Wow.
And they were critical projects.
Yeah.
And our thought was, look, if you had a holistic view of what was actually going on in the enterprise, really across all these portfolios, there should have been some more data-driven discussion about which one of those efforts that we should be pausing, so to speak. At a holistic view, let me show you what is typical of a production roadmap. What's nice about things like this is you're able to mix essentially waterfall phases with epic delivery states, which you see here. If you've got an IT portfolio, and you can break these out in whatever groupings you want, right? I'm just looking at sort of business objectives here, cost reduction, risk mitigation, et cetera. But we have what is clearly an operational initiative here. They're a big operating system upgrade, if you will. And it's a prerequisite to both epic delivery as well as project delivery. Your portfolios should, in fact, be able to show you beyond, traditional, hey, look, here's our PI planning boundaries, right, that we have coming up. But let's see interdependencies across projects and across all work, right? Epics, ops, whatever it may be.
Can I
Another
just
nice,
check, Lloyd? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can I
no,
just
no,
check,
please.
because I'm still looking at the PowerPoint slide and I wasn't sure whether you thought you'd
Oh,
switched over to Tempus or not.
yes, I have. I'm actually, thank you so much for letting me know. Let me
Okay.
stop my share
As I said,
here.
viewers, we are recording live. We do like to keep things interesting. So that's
I
our first
love it.
slide.
I love it. So is that better? Can you see what I'm
Perfect.
looking at?
That's great. That's great. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
yeah, a little interactive guidance is always helpful, Amy. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, what I'm showing here is, look, you've got both projects, operational initiatives, and epics all on the same roadmap on a common timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if you think about it from a resource perspective, is a challenging initiative, right? And I'm showing the interdependencies here between epics, ops work, and projects. So let's dive into this for just a second as well. If you'll see, wherever there's hatching here, that means that you've got an overallocation. And if you look at this, you can see, and some of these are egregious just for demo purposes, but you can see that various people are grossly overallocated. The other thing that you can set boundaries on are concurrency. So whether you've got teams that you want to be WIP limited or people that you want to make sure are only working on no more than 2 or 3 things concurrently, all of those can easily be seen right here on your roadmap. And I would submit to you that these kinds of retention guardrails are critical to be building into your portfolio flow, right? We're going to talk about value and things like that in just a minute. But if you're not looking out for your people in today's environment, I can assure you that they're going to be happy to migrate into organizations that will take care of them from that perspective.
That is a huge issue, isn't it? I mean, we all know that we were talking on the podcast about the Great Resignation, and it's staggering actually how I remember you said to me that this is an issue that's been bubbling away for years, but it really is staggering how the pandemic has changed people's perceptions of what they expect to draw from their work as well as what they expect their employer to provide for them, making this all the more crucial at this time.
Absolutely. So now let's assuming that we are going to wrap our retention guardrails into whatever decision-making process that we're using, let's talk about, this decision. You said, well, what happens if unplanned work comes in here? The first thing that you want to do is you want to size your work. You always want to size your work because you're going to have to do this anyway. You've got to figure out, who do I need? And you can size it by role, you can size it by team. In this particular example, I went ahead and picked on that operating system project. We can come in here and add a specific resource. Let's say that we need a design engineer over here. So we can put in, specific skills, if you will. Generically, we're going to need somebody, 10% for 3 months, right? And now we can go in here later and say, okay, I actually am going to need to put a named person on there and show me, if you will, what kind of technical skills that they have. I'm going to need people with JavaScript skills. Okay, as it turns out, Sarah Simmons, even though she's currently in a project role, she actually has these skills. We should be picking Sarah, right? And letting her work, but her availability is limited. So you can come in here and select people not only by what their current job role is, what are their skill sets, right? It's a very helpful thing to be able to do, on the fly.
Well, and
So
it strikes me from the point of view, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I find that fascinating because I think from the point of view of your workers as well, maybe Sarah is frustrated in her role because she's not able to do something at the moment where she can show off her fabulous JavaScript capabilities that she's so passionate about. And I believe there's even, not to take you too much off track, but this really does interest me. I believe there's even functionality within Tempus where staff workers can get involved in this as well, can they not? And they can proactively register themselves as being interested in certain departments or developments or roles or skills or whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. We call it building an internal talent supply chain here. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And yeah, we're bouncing around here, but hey, it's a live broadcast. I'm happy to do that.
That's what I like to do.
So here's the concept. Look, once you size these initiatives by role or by people, if you know them, the very notion that we can see demand by role and skill, allows people who's typically are tracking their skills in some kind of an HR database to look at demand and say, oh, you see all this red out here? If we're back here in January and we're seeing we're buried in a current role in October, well, people are clearly going to be making decisions about this. So in the first place, we're all about visibility. You should let everyone see this. You should let everyone see your production roadmap and where you're going to have challenges, because there's lots of people who want to make sure that their ambitions, their aspirations, so to speak, can be met long term. And so wise managers are out there creating opportunity for people, right? And they should be building development plans that align with people's aspirations. What we recommend is, in addition to building out a skills taxonomy, which in fact should be the same in your HR system as it is in your demand planning system, so that you can easily match skills to what's coming up in the future, you can build development plans that align that, so that when October comes, your people have already upskilled in time to meet that demand. It not only meets their demand, it meets their career aspirations. And that's what builds a culture of retention. People love that. It makes them feel valued in what they do. It makes them feel valued because they know that the institution wants to keep them, and they've proven that by helping them upskill.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
really, great topic.
Really fascinating. Can I'm sorry, I did make you jump around a little bit there, but going back to some of these views, and it's interesting you've just got onto the enterprise portfolio, because obviously we're talking about driving portfolio value flow, and I'm just wondering if you're able to tie this in with the whole issue as well of reporting upwards. Because of course,
yes,
the portfolio is going to be defined in the end by the decisions that the sponsors and the executive make about it. I might be second guessing more of your examples there, so forgive me if I am.
No, this is great. Yeah, so what we recommend is, look, size the work, and then before you introduce it into your portfolio, go model against it.
Yeah.
That you absolutely should be doing that. The lovely thing about Tempus is the interactive modeling capability. And we recommend that product managers, portfolio managers, program managers, you can have unlimited models, you can have unlimited roadmaps, but they all tie together, right? And so if, for example, the Hypersonics 2 project was work that you were considering either introducing into your portfolio or perhaps adjusting in flight because you are introducing work, you can see already down here, I've happened to break this out by role. You can break it out by any number of things. I'm actually going to go look at our teams. These are running under the federal products Agile release train, and we can see that in July they're overallocated, grossly overallocated, right? And it looks like one of the prime offenders is this Hypersonics 2 project. So let's look at what happens when we make some adjustments to the Hypersonics 2 project. The nice thing is it's totally interactive. Look, if you slide this out, you can see the allocations moving over to the right, right? And now you can come over here and see what your deltas are. Oh, look, look at all the people that I didn't even know were going to be affected, sort of the cascading impacts. And this is what is so remarkably difficult to track when you're looking at options, doing scenario modeling. You can see every other group, people down here that you didn't even know were going to be impacted because their projects were reliant on people or teams that were committed to this. And as soon as we push this, all these downstream people were affected by it. So sort of back, you can look at this by graph, however you would like, but let's pop back into our heat map here and say, well, okay, so if I want to go fatten my team, I've got 3 people on this team now. What happens if I add, one more person, 8 hours a day? Let's get a preview, right? It drops your overall utilization from 153% down to 115%, which is much more reasonable now. Now you're within sort of estimating confidence levels. And you're giving people options here. Plus, you're doing it far enough in advance for executives to say, yeah, that's a no-brainer, because this is a critical capability.
Well, I think that's, I'm so sorry, go on.
No. The other thing I wanted to show real quickly is, look, you can also show, have the system provide for you dates. Look, if you're saying, I can start this thing when I only have 20% of my people or 18%, it'll give you the optimized dates when you should be starting this, right? And you can see exactly in here, even at that date, Mary's still going to be an issue, right? Marie's still going to be an issue. But look, the rest of these people, they're getting much more available, right? And so lots of capabilities here in terms of allowing the enterprise to do very detailed modeling about interactively. You know, one other, and if I may, just saying, one of the things you can do is you can come in here and turn off whole blocks of work, right? You can come in here and say, what happens to my portfolio if I shut off all my state and local work? I mean, just take the whole darn portfolio and exclude it. Wow, look at everything that becomes green now.
Yeah, and that's actually a really, really powerful question to be able to ask, isn't it?
Oh, it is, because people want to come in and say, what about all my non-discretionary work? What if I just stop doing that? And I've run through this scenario multiple times with executives saying, look, our prioritization is jacked and we'll fix that later, but you need to tell me what is discretionary and non-discretionary. And here's my criteria for that. And they're very pragmatic about it, right? And so, you know, you can easily come in here, update that attribute and say, boom, here's what happens in this portfolio if we shut off all discretionary work. Look at the availability we have now. And now we have capacity to go out and skin these other projects, right, that we want to get back into. So, you know, the concept here with adaptive portfolio management and adaptive resource planning is let your people and your portfolio leaders actually be adaptive, to model this work before it flows in to your production roadmap. And oh, by the way, now that you've optimized your value flow, right? Because you can look at this from a time perspective. You can look at it from a money perspective. Let's do that real quick. You know, here's the dollars, you know, that we're looking at here, right? In terms of costs associated with this, value associated with this. All of the portfolio reporting that you would normally see, you know, these beautiful dashboards, so to speak, you can tie them to models as well as your production roadmap, right? So you can walk in and present the most glorious dashboards and saying, look, if we do this, here's how our metrics are going to look. If we leave things as they are, here's how our metrics are going to look. And it just makes data-driven decisioning by your executives so much more effective. They will value you whenever you walk in the room instead of being annoyed by you when you're saying, hey, I've got this ad hoc feeling that we're out of resources. It's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. And I think two things that strike me, this message about being prepared and looking down your planning stream much further out than people usually tend to do, 9 to 12 months at least. And this great example that you showed of being able to turn an entire work stream off and see what the impact is of that, at the risk of pointing out the incredibly obvious. It strikes me that is a capability that people have probably been appreciating over the last couple of years, because those are exactly, you know, the climate of the pandemic and everybody having to adapt to that. Those are exactly the kind of big questions that people will have needed to be asking of their organizations simply to cope with the environment. Would I be right in thinking that, or would you say that's a bit of an over dramatization?
No, it's not over dramatized at all. It's remarkable. You know, Prosymmetry saw fantastic growth 2020. 2021, the same. Just we are adding new customers literally weekly. You know, it's just, and not just one or two. We have hundreds of customers all over the world. And to your point, it's not just in IT departments. We're in audit departments, professional services firms. You know, these are just some of the logos here in some of the different industry spaces that we're in. And it's because of these capabilities. You know, I'll pick on an audit department. You know, they have to produce an annual audit plan. And their audits run just like projects, right? They're typically aligned with projects in many cases, but they have unique skill sets that they need to bring to bear to meet regulatory requirements, right? They need people with cybersecurity skills or people with unique IT skills, right? And if they're not planning them, they won't meet their audit expectations. And if you don't meet your audit expectations, boom, you know, whatever your government regulatory body is happy to call you out for that. And there's typically unpleasant ramifications with that. So, you know, again, whether it's enterprise IT, professional services, product development, but, you know, our customers span the gamut because we're really good at helping people continuously align, you know, work and people to continuously maximize value delivery. And the way you do that is you attack the problem upstream, right? Again, when you're down there doing the tactics, it's great. You have to do those. But if you've planned your work, you know, concisely, you know, and contiguously, you know, from 9 to 12 months out, oh, wow. Like you reduce so many problems, you know, by the time you get down to the point where you're talking about tactics.
Mm-hmm. And Lloyd, I know you're going to be taking a really deep dive into not just some of the capabilities we've touched on today, but also into the strategic issues we talked about around lean portfolio management, around the different approaches to take to resourcing the portfolio. You're going to be delving into those in much more depth at both the PMO conference and Project Challenge, and we're going to give details of that in a moment for our viewers. You are a busy guy, so this is a shorter session today, but before we wrap up, can I just check in with you whether there is anything else you'd like to show us in terms of Tempus or capabilities, or indeed whether there's any kind of message that you would invite project practitioners, PMOs, portfolio planners to carry with them as a kind of parting shot, if you will.
Yeah, you know, my take would be, look, you need to consolidate your planning. Especially if you're in a hybrid environment, you must consolidate your planning because, and this has never not been the case. And I've consulted with a lot of people. If you don't do that, you're always sub-optimizing, right? You've got the Agile people that are primarily concerned about this planning at a release train level. If they're doing anything that looks like LPM, they may or may not be, you know, planning in a way that consistently allows those that don't even know what Agile means to support their delivery properly. The same is true of projects. Look, if I have to reach out and pull Agile teams onto my project, what does that look like? We have some wonderful capabilities, which I will be showing. And if you're going to be attending these events, I would very much encourage you to come by. We'll show you exactly how you take Agile teams of different velocities and map them onto a common timeline easily, right? So that's a big problem. There's no need to be having this discussion about, am I going to normalize my velocities in my art, or heaven's sakes, across value streams? You don't need to do that. Just tell us your velocity, boom. We'll map you onto the same timeline, let you, in fact, do your estimates and story points if you want, and we'll have those story point estimates blend precisely with our estimates, percentage team estimates, all on the same projects, all on the same timeline, right? It's wonderful capability, and then you can model against it, right? And see exactly how you're impacting teams, roles, people, and operational delivery all at the same time. Very, very powerful. And so, yeah, come by, talk to us. You know, let us show you. We've hardly done it justice here today, but I certainly appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion and show you what I have. So very much looking forward to being there in London and Scotland, and meeting more people and helping you find that balance between both retention and return on investment for your portfolios.
Great stuff, Lloyd. Yeah, no, it's going to be great to see what you've got to share with people at both shows. So just to be clear for our viewers, Lloyd will be speaking as we mentioned before, at the PMO conference in June in London and Edinburgh. He'll be at Project Challenge on, I believe, September the 27th, and we're going to have the URLs where you can register for your places for those shows. On the closing slide, because obviously you're going to need to register to hear those presentations, but it is worth just echoing that message. Do come along and meet Lloyd and Greg, Prosymmetry's Vice President for Resource Management, I believe. Have I got that correctly? With Greg,
heavens.
nobody quite knows. He's
Yeah,
just a fantastic guy.
yeah, he has multiple hats.
He does have multiple hats. But he's a great guy. As you've all discovered, Lloyd is a great guy and very knowledgeable, and you always have a lot of fun at the exhibition stand, at the Prosymmetry stand at these shows. It's always great fun chatting with the guys. And I think it's fair to say, Lloyd, that you're not just there in the business of demoing your software. You are very much a specialist consultancy as well. It is very much in your interest to get behind the strategy of what customers are doing and how you can really help them solve those pain points on a more holistic level as well. Is that correct? Would you say that's
absolutely. Fair? Yeah, it's any of these things, they're solution based, right? It takes both process and technology. We have wonderful technology. The nice thing, though, about our technology is that it enables lightweight process.
Yeah.
It's just like the government, right? Nobody likes to hear the PMO come in and say, "Hey, I'm here with the PMO. We're here to help." Right? It's like, "Oh, great. What kind of process are you going to lay on us?" Look, this is lightweight. I call it a carbon fiber process. You got to have some of it, but it needs to be, reasoned. And frankly, if you have the capabilities like we're talking about, then it handles much of that for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for the moment, I think that's all we've got time for today. Lloyd, I'd like to thank you so much for taking time out to join us today. I do hope that everyone watching this webinar has found it thought-provoking and will be looking forward to seeing Lloyd speak throughout the year and finding out more about these really, really tricky issues that we just don't seem to have completely solved yet, but we can see that there are good people in the space working hard to do exactly that. I would just encourage you all as well to visit the PM Today website. Do feel free to connect with me as the Associate Editor of PM Today. Follow us on our social media channels, keep up with all the latest PM, PMO news, and of course, do visit Prosymmetry's website. That's prosymmetry.com. I believe, and
Yep.
there you can not only connect with Lloyd and his team, ask for a demo if you want one, but there's a fabulous resource section. This is by no means the first webinar or podcast that I've done with Prosymmetry. They're very active in the thought leadership space, so loads of blogs, loads of webinars, loads of ebooks that you can peruse at your leisure. That said, I think that is about all we have time for today. Lloyd, let me thank you once again for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you later in the year.
Amy, so good to be with you. And again, look forward to seeing you and others that might be watching this webinar later in person in London.
I'm sure you're going to have a lot of interest. And for our viewers, thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. We hope you found it useful. And that is the end of the session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.